Under the cold cobalt rain of destiny, every choice carries a weight that can move mountains or crush spirits. Explore the epic tales of power, sacrifice, and the ultimate price of leadership in our latest series. Click subscribe now and witness the crowning of a new cinematic legend.
Take the account, I thought. Take every last dollar. I stood in the doorway of my own home office and watched my stepmother's hands move across my desk like she owned it. Like she owned everything. She probably thought she did. My name is not important. What matters is this. I was 32 years old. I had spent the last 9 years building something real, and the woman rifling through my filing cabinet had spent those same 9 years making sure nobody in our family noticed. Let me back up. My father remarried when I was 23, fresh out of college, first real job, still naive enough to believe that family meant something automatic, something stitched into the blood whether you earned it or not. Her name was Diane. She came with a daughter from her first marriage, Sabrina, 20 at the time. Beautiful in the way that gets you out of traffic tickets and into situations you haven't earned. Sabrina had never held a job for longer than 3 months. Sabrina had never paid a bill in her life. Sabrina cried perfectly, on cue, in a way that made grown men reach for their wallets. My father looked at Sabrina and saw the daughter he always wanted. Soft, decorative, grateful for every crumb. He looked at me and saw a spreadsheet. I was the one who made sense of things. When his first business started hemorrhaging money in 2019, I restructured the accounts. When he needed a co-signer on the commercial property loan, because his credit had taken a hit, I signed. When Diane wanted to expand her little boutique and needed startup capital she couldn't get from a bank, my father looked at me over the dinner table with that particular expression, the one that meant he wasn't going to ask twice, and I wrote the check, $40,000. I told myself it was an investment. I had paperwork. I had a repayment schedule. I had a father who said, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," and meant it as a receipt. The boutique did well. Diane repaid exactly 1 installment, then stopped, and when I brought it up 6 months later, she looked at me like I had asked her to hand over a kidney. "We're family," she said. "Family doesn't keep score." I kept score. I kept very careful score. By the time I was 31, I had given or co-signed or quietly absorbed nearly $110,000 across various family emergencies. My father's roof, Sabrina's car, a lease, because she said buying was beneath her. A medical bill my father was too proud to ask help with directly, so Diane asked on his behalf, and I paid it before I even thought to hesitate. I didn't do it because I was weak. I want to be clear about that. I did it because I believed, for a very long time, that love was something you proved, that if I just kept showing up, kept covering the gaps, kept being the one who made things work, eventually someone would look at me and see me, instead of a resource. That belief died on a Wednesday in March. I had driven 2 hours to my father's house, for what Diane called a family dinner. I had brought wine. I had taken the Friday off work to stay the weekend. I pulled into the driveway at 6 p.m. and found the house full of people I didn't recognize. Diane's friends from her book club, 2 of Sabrina's girlfriends, a man I'd never met sitting in my father's chair, and a cake on the counter that said, "Congratulations, Sabrina," in pink frosting. Sabrina had gotten a promotion at a job she'd had for 4 months, assistant manager at a clothing store in the mall. My father stood at the kitchen island, beaming like Sabrina had just landed on the moon. I had closed a 7-figure contract for my company that same week. I had mentioned it to my father on the phone. He had said, "That's great, honey," and changed the subject to whether I thought Sabrina's new apartment needed a bigger couch. I ate the cake. I smiled. I drove home Sunday morning and sat in my car in my own driveway for 25 minutes before I could make myself go inside. Something shifted in me that weekend. Not dramatically, not all at once. More like a foundation that had been quietly settling for years finally reached the point where you could see the crack in the wall. I started paying attention differently. I noticed that my name was on the commercial property loan, but not on the deed. I noticed that the investment agreement I had with Diane for the boutique had a clause I hadn't read carefully, one that classified my contribution as a gift in the event of a family dispute. I noticed that my father had updated his will 2 years earlier and had not mentioned it to me. And when I asked a mutual family friend about it, she got very quiet and changed the subject. I hired an estate attorney, not to fight anyone, just to understand what I was looking at. What I was looking at was not good. The attorney, a calm woman named Patricia, who had clearly seen everything twice, walked me through it without flinching. My father's estate, as currently structured, divided his assets primarily between Diane and Sabrina. My name appeared once as the responsible party on the commercial loan, which my father still carried. If he passed before it was paid off and the property was sold, I would be liable for the remaining balance, while the sale proceeds went to the estate. I was the safety net stitched underneath a trapeze act I hadn't auditioned for. I sat with that information for 2 weeks. I didn't call my father. I didn't confront Diane. I went to work. I made my coffee. I ran my numbers. And then I made some changes. Quietly. Carefully. The way you do things when you've learned that announcing your intentions only gives other people time to move the pieces. First, I contacted the commercial property lender and began the process of removing myself as co-signer. It took documentation, a letter from my father, and 3 months of back and forth, but my father signed what I put in front of him without reading it carefully. He never did, and by June, I was off that loan. Second, I had a conversation with my own financial advisor and restructured my personal accounts in a way that made my assets significantly harder to access, gift, or claim in any informal arrangement. Everything was documented, titled correctly, clean. Third, I set up a paper trail. Every dollar I had given over the years, I pulled the bank records, the emails, the texts where my father had asked and I had agreed. I organized it into a single folder on my personal drive and backed it up in 3 places. Not to sue anyone, just to know what I knew, in a form that would hold up if I ever needed it to. Patricia reviewed everything and told me that the gift clause in Diane's boutique agreement was almost certainly unenforceable, given the documentation I had. That if I chose to pursue repayment, I had a strong case. I told her I wasn't ready to pursue anything yet. I just wanted to be prepared. She nodded. She had the eyes of a woman who had watched a lot of people wait too long, but she didn't push. I kept being a good daughter. I kept showing up to dinners. I kept answering my father's calls. I sent Diane a birthday card. I smiled at Sabrina's Instagram posts about her glow-up era, which appeared to be funded entirely by a credit card my father was quietly servicing. I was waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I just knew that whatever was coming, I wanted to be standing on solid ground when it arrived. It arrived on a Tuesday in October. My father called at 7 p.m. I was making dinner. He sounded the way he only sounded when he needed something significant, slightly too casual, slightly too warm. The specific register of a man who has rehearsed an opening. Sabrina's in a situation, he said. The situation, as it unfolded over the next 20 minutes, was this. Sabrina had co-signed a lease on a new apartment with a friend. The friend had backed out. Sabrina couldn't cover the rent alone on her assistant manager salary, and she had already moved in, and the lease had a 12-month commitment, and there was apparently no way to break it without penalties. And Diane was beside herself. And wasn't it lucky that I had that lovely savings? And surely family helped family in situations like this. The number my father mentioned, casually, like he was suggesting I pick up an extra item at the grocery store, was $1,800 a month. For 12 months, $21,600. To subsidize Sabrina's apartment because she had signed a lease she couldn't afford. I was quiet for long enough that my father said, "You still there?" "I'm here," I said. "I know it's a lot to ask." "Then why are you asking?" There was a pause. A surprised pause. My father was not accustomed to questions from me. Not real ones. "Because she's your sister," he said. And then, gently, like it was a kindness, "Because you can." I looked at my dinner going cold on the stove. I thought about Patricia's face when she laid out what my name on that loan had been worth to everyone but me. I thought about the cake with pink frosting and my father's beaming face, and a contract I'd had no idea was coming. "I need to think about it," I said. "I'll call you this weekend." My father said that was fine. He said he loved me. He hung up. I sat down at my kitchen table and I did not cry. I had done my crying already, in smaller doses, over a longer period, and there was nothing left of that particular well. What I felt instead was very clear and very quiet, like the moment after a loud noise when your ears are still adjusting and everything is sharp. I called Patricia the next morning. I told her I was ready. What followed was not dramatic. Drama is for people who haven't done their homework. What followed was paperwork, certified mail, and a series of very deliberate conversations. I sent a formal repayment request to Diane for the boutique loan, $40,000, with documentation, through Patricia's office. Polite, professional, entirely without venom. Simply a letter stating that per our original agreement, the balance remained outstanding, and I was requesting a repayment schedule. I sent a separate letter to my father, not through an attorney, just from me explaining that I would not be contributing to Sabrina's housing situation, and attaching a summary of what I had contributed to the family over the past 9 years, not as an accusation. As information, I want you to have the complete picture, I wrote. I love you, but I can't keep being the foundation of a house I'm not allowed to live in. I sent it on a Wednesday. I did not call. I let it land. Thursday. Nothing. Friday morning. Diane called. I let it go to voicemail, Her message was 17 seconds of controlled fury, dressed up as concern. Something about how I was being hurtful and divisive, and that family didn't send lawyers after family, and she hoped I would reflect on what I was doing. I reflected. I felt fine. Friday afternoon, my father called. I answered this one. He was hurt. Genuinely hurt, in the way that people are hurt when they discover that a resource has opinions. He said I was making things harder than they needed to be. He said Diane was devastated. He said Sabrina was confused about what she had done to deserve this. I said, Sabrina hasn't done anything. This is between you and me. He said, then why bring attorneys into it? I said, because the last time I trusted the arrangements we made informally, I ended up liable for a loan I'm not a beneficiary of. Patricia helped me fix that. Another pause. Longer this time. You had yourself removed from the loan? His voice had changed. The rehearsed warmth was gone. Yes, I said. In June. He didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear him processing it, the timeline, the implication, the fact that I had been moving quietly while he was still assuming everything was stationary. I didn't think you'd ever actually. I know, I said. I know you didn't. The conversation ended shortly after that. Not in a fight, nothing slammed. No one said anything they couldn't take back. It just ended. The way things end when both people have finally said the truest thing they have to say, and there's nothing useful left. What happened next took about 6 weeks to fully play out. And I'll tell you the parts that matter. Diane's attorney responded to Patricia's letter with a counter-argument leaning on the gift clause. Patricia had anticipated this. She sent back the full documentation, every email, every text, every bank transfer, the original repayment schedule Diane had signed, and a particularly useful email from Diane herself from 2021 inches, which she had promised, in writing, to get current on the installments by Q3. They had not gotten current by Q3, or any Q thereafter. The gift clause argument collapsed. Diane paid. Not all at once. They negotiated a structured settlement, smaller than what I was owed but documented in binding, but she paid. When Patricia called to tell me, her voice had a particular quality to it that I recognized as professional satisfaction kept on a tight leash. My father called me 3 weeks after that. Not about money. He called on a Sunday morning, and for the first 30 seconds neither of us said anything important, and then he said, I think I've been looking at things wrong for a long time. I didn't tell him he was forgiven, because forgiveness isn't a light switch and I don't believe in performing it on a timeline. I told him I was glad he'd called. That was true. Sabrina found a roommate by November. Her Instagram that month was full of posts about new chapters and leveling up. I wished her well, genuinely. From a comfortable distance. I am not estranged from my father. We talk. Things are different, quieter, more careful, more honest, in the way that things become honest, when the comfortable fictions are too expensive to maintain. He does not ask me for money anymore. I do not offer it. Last month he came to visit me for the first time since everything. I made dinner. We sat at my kitchen table and he looked around my apartment, the one I own, the one with my name on the deed, the one nobody else has a claim to, and he said, You've built something real here. I know, I said. He nodded slowly. He looked older than I remembered. He looked, for maybe the first time, like a man who understood that he had been careless with something that mattered. I poured us both more coffee. I didn't need him to say anything else. The accounting was done, the balances were settled, and whatever came next between us would be built on ground that was actually solid. That's the only kind of ground I build on now. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped letting other people build on top of me and call it love.